Hey, I'm Shaye, and you're listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you are a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started and keep your herd ahead of the herd. Today, we are visiting with Kane Wellnitz about employee retention on ranches and in agriculture in general. Kane is going to speak to his experiences as a rancher as well as an ag business owner. He's going to share strategies that have worked for him and ways he's continuing to try and improve with as well. But with that, let's visit with Kane because this is an important topic for all of us. Hey folks, can I steal your attention away for less than a minute? Ranching is a business, and profitable ones don't happen by accident. If you're ready to run your operation with clarity, confidence, and a strategic plan, my new course, Profit Foundations for Ranchers, is built for you. You'll learn how to define measurable success for your ranch, identify where profit is slipping through the cracks, and put systems in place that help you make better decisions faster. This isn't the theory, it's a practical, ranch-tested business training designed to improve your bottom line. It's the same strategies I use on our own operation. Visit casualcattleconversations.com to learn more, and the direct link is in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the episode. All right, Kane. Well, it is fun to finally catch up to you and find a time that works to have you on the show today. And I'm excited to talk about the employee retention topic as it relates to ranching and ag business in general, because I think we like to complain a lot about not having enough help, but we don't come at it with a solutions-oriented approach as much as we should. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Shaye.
All right. So help the audience get to know you a little bit and share with us why you believe in the beef industry.
Yeah, that's a great question, man. You always ask good questions on your podcast. I really am a believer in the beef industry, mostly because of the people, the work ethic, the integrity, and I like to think our overall business common sense, especially in the last 2 decades, is really unmatched. I've been all over the United States working in the beef industry, and I really think, not to brag on us too much, but we really do have some of the nicest people. It's fun to go anywhere in this country and meet someone who knows the back of a cow, and you can pretty much instantly have a friend anywhere you go. So that makes me a believer. I think this country needs a lot of that right now, just that common ground.
So the reason I'm having you on to talk about this subject is, well, first of all, your wife said you would be a great person to talk to and speak to about this subject because you have experience on the ranch side with retaining employees so that they want to be there and want to stick around. But you also have a lot of hiring and retention experience with an ag consulting business as well. So can you kind of explain, I'm going to have you explain both of those, but I'm going to have you start with the ranch. Help the listeners get kind of an idea of a little bit of the size and scope of your operation so they know where you're coming from when we talk about that aspect of retaining employees today.
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents are first-generation ranchers from western Nebraska, western South Dakota. They were high school sweethearts in 1985. I'm going to get some numbers wrong, I'm sure. In 1985. Started with an FSA loan and a potload of sale barn cows. They ran cows on shares for several years as well. And then in 1993, they bought the first chunk of the ranch that I grew up on, northeast of Shatter, Nebraska, about 25 miles. And so that's where I grew up. I grew just southwest of Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Went to a 2-room country school. We had 2 rooms there until 8th grade, and then went to high school in Shattern and grew up on that ranch. In 2012, we had a natural disaster, a fire that burned, I'm going to get this wrong, I think over 110,000 acres in western Nebraska. They actually called it the Wellnitz fire. And it burned a lot of our lease ground and some of my home place. And that kind of pushed us outside the box that year unnecessarily to buy another ranch in Martin, South Dakota, which would be just south of the La Creek Wildlife Refuge. And so that event really kind of spent us into growth mode, I would say. So we bought that ranch, and we recently sold it in 2021 and bought another ranch southwest of Cody, Nebraska. So now we operate two ranches, one in the Sandhills and one just south of kind of Badland country in South Dakota, right on the state line.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you walking through that. And how many people are on the ranch today? You can talk family and non-family members included in that.
Yeah. Yeah. So my mom and dad have always, that's what they've always done. They've always ranched, always worked for themselves. Then we have Andrea Beck, who manages our Cody ranch, and Manny Acosta. He is also on that ranch. Manny is full time with us, but he's seasonal. He also works with me in my consulting business. So Manny's there a lot during the busy times, has a CDL, trucks for us, a lot of different things. And then we will hire a lot of day help traditionally, but a lot of the same people throughout the years, right? So it's a good community in both places.
Okay. So we've kind of got that background information of where you're coming from. Now tell us a little bit about the consulting side. What do you have going on there? What's your role with that?
Yeah. So my consulting business is Landbridge Partners. I founded that with Will Ruffalo in 2020. We've seen a huge need during what I like to refer to as the energy crisis, where a lot of developers were hitting farmers and ranchers with energy proposals, and a lot of these landowners, I'll call them, didn't know what to do, right? I'm careful to say this, but big corporations can often come off pretty scary to farmers and ranchers, and oftentimes just frankly they are, right? Sometimes they're trying to get energy developed on properties that maybe people don't want. And so we kind of stepped in as an advisor to ranchers and farmers and looked at contracts for them, provided legal services, and in all types of energy, oil, gas, mineral rights, dealt in wind and solar, right? These days we've dealt in easements. And so that's kind of the core of our business. We offer those services. In the last 3 years, we've also developed an asset management and asset inspection business that we are currently in 24 states. We do inspections for banks, insurance companies, other farm and ranch management companies. And we focus mostly in the commodity market. I would say cattle, corn, soybeans is our main business.
All right. What would you say is kind of the biggest lesson you've learned with hiring people, even from both those experiences? It doesn't have to be ranch or the consulting. What's just in ag in general? What's one of the biggest lessons you've learned about hiring ag employees?
Man, I've learned a lot of lessons. That's the problem. I've learned so much in the last, I'll even call it 24 months about hiring people, specifically in ag. Ag people are great, right? Like I don't want to brag on us and toot our own horn, but ag people really have a strong work ethic. Ag people won't always tell you they're unhappy. We are really good at suffering. We are really good at working all day and not complaining. And that can be an issue, right? Especially as an employer, you're like, yeah, I need to know your problems. I need to know what's frustrating you. And so the biggest thing I've learned about hiring people is telling them that up front, like, hey guys, you need to call me. Get a hold of me if you don't like something. Let me know that there's a problem. And that is honestly communication. Let's get on top of the problem before it becomes a problem where you want to leave. That's my biggest issue. It's really expensive to hire people. I would much rather keep people than have to hire more people.
So that's something that I definitely took away from like my internship experiences. And then I would say coming back to whether it was my parents' operation or even now my husband's family's operation, like that was not natural, especially with family members or tight knit, just to be like, hey, I don't like this or this isn't working. So what are some steps you've done on the ranch side? Because you said you've got Andrea and Manny, who are kind of the non-family members who are consistently there. How do you work on improving that communication with them, or so that they feel open with sharing what is and is not working?
Yeah, and I'll be the first to say, I mean, we don't get it right. I know Andrea will listen to this and call me, and she'll be like, well, geez, there's a lot we should work on, right? But she's awesome. She's very independent. She is I could not ask for a better person to manage a ranch. And it's a large place. There's a lot of cows on that ranch. We run a good size operation, and she does a phenomenal job. The part that we all struggle with is my parents are at one ranch. Me, her, and Manny tend to be at the other. Obviously, we go back and forth to help each other. But the biggest thing, communication wise, that I think we've learned is just really making a point to let everyone know what's going on. And we still struggle with this. We still do a bad job at it. I mean, it's like you never, I don't know if you ever get good at it, and that's the point. I think you have to constantly work at it. I catch myself doing it all the time. You got to let people know what's going on. And so I really like my people to manage themselves. I don't try to micromanage. I'm not a micromanager, and Andrea definitely has communicated that to me. Sometimes she wants input, right? And whether that's probably not for me, that's probably from my parents, to be honest. So then I need to call my dad or my mom and say, hey, like what are we doing here, right? We need to sit down, talk with Andrea and see what the plan is. It's same with Manny, right? He goes back and forth a lot. So it might just be something as simple as, hey, Manny, we need stuff picked up today at this ranch to take to the other ranch. But I would just say constant communication.
I think that's interesting that you brought up, you're not a micromanager. And sometimes, Andrea expresses that she needs more communication on that front because I think as someone who's worked with micromanagers, sometimes it can be so frustrating with the over communication. And I haven't found that balance yet either with our own employees with trying to, communicate appropriately, but not micromanage or under communicate. That's a tough one.
And Andrea she is so good that, I mean, frankly, she is more talented than I could ever be, especially with just knowing cows. I mean, she knows every cow in our place. So there's not a lot I could help her with sometimes, to be honest. I mean, that's how good she is. So when she comes to me, she's like, hey, what's the plan here? It's like, yeah, it's a good reminder that we need to be talking more, right? So yeah, we're very blessed with that aspect, but at the same time, we definitely can always improve on making a better plan. Ranching is one of those businesses where it's so hard to make a plan, right? Because weather impacts everything. I think it's our number one factor, right? It depends on how long you can graze a certain pasture, and that might determine when you're going to get to a set of corrals that you want to precondition at. And so you can make the perfect plan 30 days out, and the next thing you know, that is no longer the plan. And so that's part of the issue, right? Is you can make a plan and then it falls apart. So the biggest thing is just kind of staying in communication so that you can change it on the fly.
And where did you find Andrea? I mean, how long has she been working with you? How did you find her? What did that process look like?
Yeah, really, really lucky to find Andrea. So she has worked for us for over 5 years. She worked at the Martin, South Dakota ranch that we owned before we purchased this one. And Andrea actually came to us from a neighbor by recommendation. She had interned with him, and he's the Lesmeister family, one of our closest friends and neighbors. They ranch next to us at our Shattern place. And so she came by recommendation, and we hired her. And I mean, frankly, she's just proved herself ever since.
Okay, and what about Manny?
I went to college with Manny, and Manny came to us in a time of, I'll call it, crisis. My mom had an accident, and she had a bum leg for quite a while, and so I called Manny. I was busy with my other business that summer, and I said, hey, Manny, could you come run some equipment? He's really mechanical, help us hay. And the next thing you know, he's been with us for over 3 years.
All right. So what, in your conversations with whether it's Andrea or Manny, what makes them want to stay, or what have you done to retain them?
Yeah, the biggest thing is, in my opinion, is ownership. That is the strategy that my parents have implemented, and I'm really proud of them for that strategy. So Andrea runs cows with our cows. She's got cows in every cow herd that we have on the ranch. She's got cows in that group. We run all of them together. So, no cows getting special treatment, but she has ownership through her cows. And I'm very proud of Andrea because she is really built. It's really hard in this day and age to build a cow herd. It really is. And she bought her own cows when she started working for us. She didn't have any cows. She bought her own cows, and I mean, she's grown really fast. And that in my opinion, I mean, I'd love to ask her if that is her opinion as well, but I think that really helps, right? She's bought in. She really cares about, everything we do because it also affects her, right? And I know for a fact she'll be listening to this. She probably gets annoyed with some things that I want to do, and she probably is like, that doesn't make any sense. And half the time she's probably right or more. So that's also good for me, right? Because we were just talking yesterday about vaccine protocols, right? It's like, I don't know. Thankfully, I have a wife who has a doctorate in ruminant nutrition, so I can rely on her. We were, quizzing Anna, what do you think about this protocol? And so it's fun to have that ownership, in my opinion. I really enjoy it because now when you have that conversation, it's less about having it with an employee and more about having it with a partner, if that makes sense.
That does make a lot of sense. And I know other people have had success with that model, if you will, as far as a benefit or perk per se for being an employee. And that makes a lot of sense on the farming and ranching side. I'm curious on the consulting side, what retention efforts do you see working there?
Yeah, it's a much different business. I think before we jumped on this call, I like to joke that I call it the real world, right? Not that ranching is not the real world, but it's the norm, I would say, for America these days, is a 9 to 5 W-2 type job. And so our consulting business is still agriculture. So it's still different from the norm. I would say it's still maybe different from the real world, but the strategies that we have implemented is flexibility. I think in this day and age, it is really important to offer your employees flexibility. I really want to offer as much as I can as long as they're getting their job done. People have lives. It's important to work for a living, but there's other reasons to be alive on this earth. And I know my employees have goals and aspirations other than working for me. And so if I can help them make the money to accomplish those goals, that is what I want to do. And the other thing, that component that comes into accomplishing your goals, is time, right? And so it's one thing if we pay them well, it's another thing if they have zero time after that. And so I think that's our biggest strategy. We can't always do that, right? We're in our busy season right now. We got guys putting in 70-hour weeks, but hopefully after the busy season, they might get a full week off for, a month at a time. And so we really try to be flexible with people. We got a lot of, geez, 4 or 5 guys right now with young little kids. It's like, I want to make sure those guys are making it to football games and baseball games. So
How have you incorporated flexibility on the ranch side?
yeah, the ranch side that's hard. Cattle need fed 24/7. Water needs checked 24/7. Andrea, for sure, I'm lucky in the fact that she loves the ranch, and she doesn't want to take a lot of vacations, although I'm sure some days when she's around me, she wants to. But I think a lot of things, like just a simple thing is, hey, this afternoon, let's do something we actually want to do. Let's move cows. Let's ride our horse. Let's do something we enjoy. Unfortunately, ranching nowadays, I would say there's a lot of other stuff than that you have to do, right? Equipment maintenance. Some people love that. I would say Andrea and I err on the side of not enjoying that. We'd much rather be on the back of a horse and moving cows, or, checking and doctoring stuff. So it's little vacations is what I'll say on the ranch, because you might not be able to get away, but you might be able to do something fun for half a day, and that kind of resets your mood for the week.
I like that approach. And I think that is tough because with any business, there are a lot of things we don't want to do but need to do to keep the wheels turning. And, it's nice to delegate where you can to people who do enjoy those, but that's not always an option, or often not an option when you're strapped for time and hands that can help.
Absolutely.
So did you, or do you provide housing for Andrea or anything along those lines as far as like an incentive or a benefit?
So we do provide housing. We're in a unique situation. I know you have a broad listening base, Shaye. I know people all over the U.S. listen to you. So everybody's situation is different. Every state is different. One of my favorite hobbies is talking to people in different states about how they ranch. And it's so different everywhere. I would say we're very unique and ununique in the same way is we're so far from town on both places, but specifically the Cody Ranch. It's 70 miles to a good grocery store. And so housing is an absolute necessity because if we had to have an employee drive from town, we would never get anything done. And so that for us, it's almost like we have to provide it. But I've talked to a lot of guys, in like the Texas Panhandle, for example, and sometimes that's an option, sometimes it's not for them, right? Because sometimes they have a little town right next to them and employee can get their own housing, but we do provide it.
Yeah. Well, that's partially why I asked, because I know you're much more remote than, say, I am, where I'm 4 miles from town. So if it's a matter of, hey, there's a few apartment buildings or houses for rent or whatever it may be, there are options there and grocery store and about everything you need in the town of Wishick. So yeah, that's kind of why I asked.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a great strategy in the ag industry. I really do. The thing that I dislike is, sometimes I think I've seen ranch ownership use that, as leverage. And I never want to think about it as leverage. I want to think about it as I have a good place for my employee to live and they can get to the calving lot really fast. That's what I like to think about it as.
So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you've talked about, with Andrea, you've created that sense of ownership with her being able to have her own herd kind of within your guys' herds. And then on the consulting side, you've also talked about trying to be as flexible with time as you can. And I view that as creating opportunities for your employees. Are there any other ways you've created opportunities for your employees in either business that you want to speak to today?
I would say that I really like my business partner's approach, Will, on the consulting side. He is a big believer in listening to people's ideas. I really like how he will hear everyone out. So if someone has an idea, they come to us and they say, hey, we're seeing this right now. We feel like this is terribly inefficient, which, for example, right now we went through a large growth spurt. So we have a lot of inefficiencies. And so it's been really good to watch him, take those calls and call me and say, hey, Greg just figured this out, right? We need to change. And that I think is a good way to let employees grow because they're taking responsibility and, they get to make their own impact on the business, which is probably going to help them, move up in the company. So that would be one example. I should think of a better example, to be honest, but I'll think about it.
I think that was a good example because I think it's easy to want to just have all the ideas ourselves. And sometimes we forget how many good ideas can come from people who are in different roles because everyone has a different perspective and those different perspectives are incredibly valuable no matter what it is or what the business is.
Absolutely. I would also say now that I'm thinking about to add to that, we are very young business owners. And so we have, guys in our 50s working for us. And, some of them have ran their own companies. Some of them may be retired and have worked for 40 years. And it would be really silly if we didn't listen to their advice. I don't care who you are. If you got 20 years on someone else, you have a lot of life experience and advice that you can offer. Not always good, but experience. So it's worth listening to.
Well, it's something to listen to, whether it applies or not. You can learn something from everyone. Absolutely. So when you look at how things are working for you, whether that's ranching or consulting, and then you look at other people in ag who are struggling with employees, what do you think they're not seeing? What do you think they're doing wrong or missing per se when it comes to the employee retention side of things?
Yeah, it's so hard because I feel like I get it wrong a lot, Shaye. I don't think that we get it right. We try really hard to get it right. One thing that I will say I see in the ranching side is it's hard because your margins are tight a lot of times. We've been blessed with 2 good years of market, but a lot of times it comes down to pay, to be honest. I would say the ag industry as a whole is probably behind on pay. you got to pay good help. You got to pay them and you got to keep them. And so I see that across the board. I do a lot of work in the Texas Panhandle, do a lot of work in the Western United States. That's a consistent thing you see across the board is a lot of ranches still stuck in what they were paying in 1997. And so that's an extreme example, but I think it is really important to pay your people well. I know sometimes it just doesn't make sense on the books and you can't do it, right? But if you can, I think in the long term, it's going to save you money from having to look and hire and not have any time yourself when you're missing an employee or, with cattle worth what they are. If you're short on help and something doesn't get doctored and something dies, there goes $3,000, right? And if that happens about 10 times, there's an employee, right? So that's one way I would say. One thing I would say that I see across the board in not just ranching, in ag in general.
I've seen that too. And I think it's interesting you brought that up because I remember a few years ago when I was graduating from college, my dad was like, just out of curiosity, like, what are starting wages that, your friends are getting here or there or that you've seen in job searches and whatnot? And when I told him, he was like, you're kidding. And I was like, no, but here's what rent is, here's what utilities may be, and it all depends on where you're living, and that's just where it's at now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think he'll mind me saying this. Manny, for example, we try to pay Manny really well because his mechanic abilities are just amazing. My dad operates lean on the equipment side. We always deal in old equipment, old pickups, different things. And, Dad has pointed out to me, and Andrea will get frustrated with a piece of equipment once in a while. And it's like, well, you can take it to town and we can get a $2,000 bill, or we can let Manny spend some time on it. He can have it fixed in, less time. And so that's a huge asset to have Manny. When he's gone, me and Andrea definitely feel it because we do not have his mechanical skills. But that's one example I would say, if you can find a key player like that on your operation, I always think it's worth the money, especially if your local John Deere shop rate is $250 right now or an hour or more. So,
well, and to have someone who enjoys it too is the big thing.
Yeah, and I don't know if Manny always enjoys it. He'll laugh at that, but he's really good at it. So,
well, that's a fair point too. Philip and I had someone working for us who he liked wrenching on stuff and he was good at it, and we really feel it now that he's gone because no one else likes to do it. I mean, we absolutely will do anything else before we have to do something with equipment.
Yeah, I think my favorite quote for Manny, one of my favorite quotes is he came in one night and Manny's dad does a lot of mechanic work, and he came in one night. He's like, I realize now why Dad would come in and not want to talk for about 30 minutes because he was working on a frustrating problem in the shop. So I've always thought that's kind of funny. So,
well, Kane, I guess the final question I have for you is if you could go back to your first 5 years and you can think about this as being back on the ranch or the consulting or a combination, what would you do differently?
I think I would prioritize my time management harder. I still struggle with that today, and I've realized that when I am unavailable, it slows down, employees, right? If I'm not managing my time well and someone has questions for me and I can't answer them in a timely fashion, it really slows down what you're doing. Specifically on the ranch, I mean, Andrea will call me and, need to make a decision on it might be something just as simple as where do we want to order this part from? And I am known to procrastinate. And so that is something that I always wish I could go back in time and prioritize because I've gotten a lot better at it in the last 5 years. My time management skills have gotten better. I'm still terrible for the record, but if I could go back in time, I would implement some of the strategies I have today and utilize them. So that, I know that seems like an odd answer to that question, but I think it really affects, how I interact with people that work with me and for me.
All right. Well, I know I said that was the final question, but that other question came back to me. So we did not, you talked about, on the ranch side, Andrea came to you as a referral. You knew Manny from college, but you're hiring a lot more people on the consulting side. You've had a big growth spurt. What would you encourage ranchers to do in the hiring process to help kind of vet people out and find the right people based on what you've learned in both experiences? Say they don't have someone that comes to them from a referral. Like, what should ranchers keep in mind in the hiring process to really try and find the right person early on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think it depends on the operation. I think something I've learned is, we spend a lot of time horseback. We still live in that country where you need a horse. And, so sometimes, I catch myself, thinking like, man, we really have to have people that can ride a horse. Then I'm reminded that there is a whole nother ag industry to pull from called the row crop industry. And a lot of those guys can fix anything. They grew up on a farm, they know equipment, they know how to build stuff, they know how to weld. And so an encouragement I have is look in other industries. I mean, I know it's important for people to be able to get on the back of a horse, but you could probably teach that if you're a rancher. You probably know how to teach someone how to do that. I know a lot of big outfits in Texas, Nevada, those areas that I'm sure that's a non-negotiable, but in Nebraska, it seems like there's a good mix of, what you have to do day to day, and not all of it's on the back of a horse. And so I would just encourage people to not be scared to look at other industries that are close, even like the oil fields, for example. There's a lot of good guys. I got a good friend who works in the oil fields, and I mean, he'll tell you a lot of those guys are farm and ranch guys originally, right? So I would encourage people to look outside of just cattle. We've done that a lot in our consulting business. I always want to call on my cattle contacts first, but some of the first people I've called is my farm friends from college, the guys who have row crop and soybeans. And that's a good way to still get referrals, but maybe they're not just in the cattle side.
All right. Well, Kane, I really appreciate your time today and you sharing your honest experiences with everyone when it comes to employee retention and sourcing too. I know we touched a little bit on that too. For anyone out there listening, thanks for tuning in today. And if any resources were mentioned throughout the show, you can be sure to go find those in the show notes. Remember, the best way to support this podcast and all of your other favorite podcasts is to leave a rating or review, and better yet, share it with a friend who's going to find this information valuable, because podcasts still grow best by word of mouth. But with that, happy ranching, folks.